David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
There's a billionaire named Leon Cooperman who cried on live television, and there's a lot of sort of misreporting about why he was crying or what the entire point of the thing was. If you've not heard of Cooperman, he's a hedge fund guy. He runs Omega Advisors. He's been sort of going back and forth with Elizabeth Warren, saying, I don't need Elizabeth Warren telling me I'm a deadbeat and that billionaires are deadbeats, arguing that the vilification of billionaires makes no sense to him and that the world is a better place because of people like Bill Gates and Michael Bloomberg and other rich people. This happened on CNBC. Let's look at it and then discuss.
I think it's kind of obvious people can not only see the emotion on your face, but hear it in your voice when you talk about this, Lee. Why?
I care. That's it.
But in all that you have said of where the economy is, where the stock market is, the wealth that has been created since the president was inaugurated through the stock market appreciation, you still think it would be a better idea if he did not run for re-election at this particular time?
Well, I think I said, you're looking to get me into trouble.
So listen, there's no shame in crying. I mean, this is 0% about, oh, look at the guy crying. It's not manly to cry. It's not about anything like that at all. And there are also headlines that have promoted this as Leon Cooperman is crying over being taxed or whatever. It's not really about that either. He's signed a pledge to give away like all of his money or almost all of his money. This is about, first of all, a guy who's 76 and has more than $3 billion crying because he sees Elizabeth Warren's policy ideas of a wealth tax as bad for the country. And more importantly, he's crying because he seems to feel that these policies are personal attacks on billionaires as individual people, as being individually bad people. This is what I think the main point that should be made about all of this is, and the idea of a wealth tax and inequality and dealing with it. This is not about billionaires personally being bad people. This is about fixing a broken system that allows this level of inequality, that allows a country as rich as the United States to still have people starving or unable to meet basic expenses or unable to afford an unexpected $400 expense or at risk of bankruptcy if they get sick or have a medical condition or some kind of car accident. That's what this is about. So I understand Leon Cooperman taking it personally to a degree, but someone needs to tell him that's simply not what it's about. I'll even go further. I am open to the idea that Leon Cooperman is a pretty good guy at a personal level. I might not agree with his politics, but at the same time, he is part of the system that allows the raping and pillaging of the greater good and the middle class for the gain of the financial industry and really rich dudes like him. Now, how could he both be an okay guy and part of such a corrupt system and process? This is the way it is. Personally, he's pledged to give away some huge portion of his fortune or all of it. Okay, that's a good thing. He's a philanthropist. That's fine. But at the same time, he was one of the top executives at Goldman Sachs during the time that they were engaging in all sorts of criminal activities for self-enrichment, including insider trading, manipulating energy prices, mortgage fraud, accounting fraud. So he's taking it personally, maybe because he doesn't understand. Maybe he's taking it personally because he has a guilty conscience. But the policy prescriptions of taxing wealth or capital gains or whatever, these are not attacks on people personally, or at least they shouldn't be seen that way. It's about even good people can be cogs in a system that is fundamentally immoral, and the immorality of the system needs to change. It's not necessarily the people, although many of the people could use some realignments to their moral compasses as well. And so I think that this is an interesting video. I think that a lot of the coverage of it has maybe misunderstood what this is and isn't about, but it actually gives us some insight into some of the resistance that exists out there to the policies of people like Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders, which is that it is being taken personally, and it really shouldn't be. because this is about fixing a system, not about calling individual people necessarily bad people. That being said, industry is filled with horrible people. If you look at, executives at fossil fuel companies who knew the damage that their business was doing to the planet and to people's health for decades, and they covered it up and continued raping and pillaging the resources of the planet at the expense of people's health and the planet's health, that's not something a good person does. But we should be able to think about these things discreetly and separate them out and really make more sense than what some of the salacious headlines seem to be implying. Here's a very interesting story about damage to the Trump brand. Now, I don't want to be confusing here because in total, the presidency has been very profitable for Donald Trump and his family. They've continued making hundreds of millions of dollars in total. Much of it they've made by using their positions of power and privilege in the Oval Office to make that money. Trump's hundreds of trips to play golf at his own golf clubs, for example, funneling government money, your money, taxpayer money, into his businesses. But there's another side to this, and the Trump presidency has done some pretty major damage to one of the things that Donald Trump values the most, which is his brand and his popularity and whether people like him. This is one of the big motivators for people like Donald Trump and for Trump specifically. And a lot of Trump-branded condo buildings, for example, have removed Donald Trump's name from them, not wanting any association with Trump, even by name. But in Chicago, there's something very interesting going on. The profits at Trump's Chicago hotel are reportedly down 89%. And Trump's company is saying that violence in Chicago is a reason for that downturn. Now, understand, profits at Trump's Chicago hotel are down from nearly 17 million in 2015 to just 1.8 million in 2018, according to documents that were filed with Cook County, even though Trump has been funneling money into that hotel by holding campaign events there and doing all of the things that we know him to do as a president to self-enrich. The Trump Organization's explanation for this is that, number one, Chicago is down as a market overall, and that the perceived threat of gun violence has harmed visitation to the destination. Now, the problem with this explanation is that gun violence or not, down market or not, other hotels in Chicago are doing just as well or better over the last few years. It's Trump's hotel that is suffering. Interestingly as well, Donald Trump's Washington, D.C. hotel, which of course has been patronized by all sorts of world leaders and diplomats when they visit D.C., is also struggling. And Eric Trump recently said, quote, this is just an amazing thing to say, people are objecting to us making so much money on the hotel, and therefore we may be willing to sell it, maybe abandoning that business altogether. I love how Eric says it like it's unfair. Yeah, people are objecting to having a profit center blocks from the White House from which you self-enrich, thanks to being president of the United States. People have a problem with that, and rightly so, and rightly so. So Trump and his kids, they love to repeat that the presidency has been terrible for them financially because they've stepped back. Trump has separated from the businesses. They're great, moral, ethical people who have missed out on a lot of money they could have made if Trump wasn't president. Do not be confused. Being president has allowed Donald Trump in totally new ways to funnel money directly into his pockets. But there are also some specific cases where even Donald Trump's corruption and self-enrichment attempts can't override the dance he has done. There are specific cases, see in D.C., in Chicago, as examples, where Trump being president has so disgusted people that they simply aren't going to his hotels. That's a good thing, but it doesn't make Donald Trump's self-enrichment schemes any less disgusting as far as it involves the golf clubs and all of the other stuff that we've talked about. Let me know your thoughts. I'm on Twitter at @dpacman. Follow me there. Follow the show on Twitter at David Pakman Show as well.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Today's new members of the day are Philip Cucciara and George Arnold. Philip and George, thank you so much for your support. I do appreciate it. And someone who's been a member supporting independent media for almost 5 years now is Derek Langendorfer. Derek, I really appreciate your support. Appreciate almost 5 years of that support. Join these great people. Support the programs that you like. Support programs you want to keep on the air. at www.joinpacman.com. Takes under a minute to sign up. I promise you it is painless. You can pay with any credit or debit card or PayPal. Very exciting. You can also become a patron at patreon.com/David Pakman Show. All right, let's see what is on people's minds getting to the end of a very, very busy political week. We'll go to the phone lines at 617-830-4750, starting today with our caller from the 714 area code. Caller from 714, what's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hi, is that me?
Yes, it is.
Hi, David. My name is Keandre. I'm calling from the San Francisco Bay Area. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing well. So I had a question. So I know that the right they have this thing where, and you talked about this on your show before, where it's sort of like they have these little quippy responses they can throw at you, oh, abortion is murder and
yep.
blah, blah, blah. But we in the left have to do a lot of explaining. Well, no, it's not, because science says, life begins here or there, and global warming and all that. We have to do a lot of explaining. Do you think the left needs a sort of rebranding? And if you do, how so? Like, how can we be as quippy, as quick to respond as the right, and kind of have that level of just ease of understanding?
I don't know that the left needs to rebrand. I think the left needs to become better at framing. And George Lakoff has written about this a lot. And he has actually written, he has suggestions about how should the left talk about taxes? How should the left talk about things like, using the military around the world in the context of how the right views patriotism and the left views patriotism. There are a lot of really good thinkers on this issue. I don't think it's an issue of rebranding. I think it's just an issue of figuring out better ways to talk about a lot of this stuff. And we're even seeing it during the Democratic debates. I mean, the candidates are getting better. But take, for example, this question of should undocumented immigrants get free health care? It's like when that comes up, you need to be ready to take control of the question rather than just answering it in a particular way. Elizabeth Warren had one good instance when she was asked about, should the government be able to tell you what kind of straw to use? And she didn't accept the question as asked. She said, hold on a second. That's not even the issue. The issue is actually that is almost completely insignificant in really dealing with the issue of pollution and the environment. And the left needs to retake control of the conversations rather than fall into what you are correctly pointing out are often fruitless, nuanced, necessary explanations that don't really appeal to people who are less avid followers of politics.
Mm-hmm. And then another quick little thing. So I also would like to point out, because I thought this was interesting, I was just recently talking to my uncle on my mother's side, and he was in the military, and he often said, being on the left in the military is really different because you can't really speak out because you hear your military buddies, they're all saying, right-leaning stuff, and it's kind of difficult being on the left in the military because it's kind of viewed as un-American in a way. And I thought that was interesting to point out because that's what made me think about the whole rebrand and whatnot.
Yes, that is interesting. And I appreciate you bringing it up. Keandre, appreciate hearing from you.
All right. Thank you. Take care.
Very good. Take care. Let's go next to our caller from the 623 area code. Who is calling today from 623?
Can you hear me, David?
I can. Who's this?
Oh my gosh, this is amazing. Hey, David, this is Matthew. I've been watching you since you were on the Drunken Peasants, actually, like forever ago.
Yeah, I don't even remember when that was.
Awesome. I did. Yeah, it's been a while. I actually was on a trip going to Europe to be with my dad for a while, and I tried calling over there. But now that I'm back in the U.S. with my U.S. number, I'm glad it actually went through. But I'll stop talking about all that kind of stuff. It's not really a question, but it's more of like getting your opinion if you think this is even feasible or not. Because basically, well, let me put it in this context first, because I have two fundamental sets of beliefs, I guess, that I've incorporated into what I'm about to try to explain. And those two are basically good ideas that help people are good ideas, regardless of their origin or where they come from. If you can implement them successfully and it's proven to have results, then, they obviously, they should be implemented. And the other one, excuse me, is that if corporations do not exist for the people, then by proxy, or not by proxy, but by default, they directly are like in existence against us because they're not seeing us as like a, what's it called? Like a reliable or like a consumer base that they want to give like the best product possible. I mean, how many stories are we going to see where corporations have been cutting costs? They've been trying to get, more
I think I got you. Okay, so
given
that that's the context, Matthew, what were you going to ask my opinion about?
Yeah, sorry. I'm not trying to waste time. But basically, do you think that it would be feasible after implementing a policy, or maybe not a policy, but some kind of regulation to where not only the workers for these companies are getting paid like a minimum wage that's enough to where they could actually go out and buy goods and services in this capitalistic society that we're all a part of, that will therefore increase demand for certain products and then supply. If they can do that and also set maximum wages for themselves at the highest levels, and all the other excess, profits, all the, things at the end of the year, all that should be put back into the business, basically, to ensure things like quality control and, making sure that they have the best product possible. Because like I said before, if a company isn't existing for the people, then they're existing against us just to exploit us, basically. Does that make any
so are you
sense,
saying
is that kind of like...
So basically that's it's mandating companies be nonprofits or co-ops. I mean, a nonprofit at the end of the year, the money it stays in the organization, and that's a very particular type of alignment. As far as maximum wages, I'm not sure the legal infrastructure that would be would be complicated. It would be very hard to actually implement, and I think there would be massive opposition. I think there's a lot of lower hanging fruit that could be done first in terms of democratizing the workplace, including putting workers on boards of directors, having worker representation on boards of directors. Definitely. And there's a lot of other things that would be much simpler to do legislatively and legally that I would look at first.
Yeah, of course. I'm not really, I do spend quite a bit of time thinking about these topics, but obviously, like, this is your job. And like I said, I've been watching you since you're on the Drunken Peasants a while ago.
Right.
I've just been sitting on this for a while, and I thought, well, if I'm going to get anybody's opinion, let me try to get David Pakman's.
All right, Matthew, I appreciate you thinking of me so highly. I'm flattered. I'm glad that you were able to get on, and I do hope to hear from you again. Let's go to our friend Manuel Antonio Rodriguez, calling, I believe, from Mexico City, or at least potentially from Mexico City.
Hola, buenos días, David. No soy de Mexico
estás?
City. Mis papás son de Guatemala. My parents are from Guatemala. I'm doing good. Thank you for taking my call.
Of course.
I'm actually calling you live right now from Beverly Hills. Our organization, the Mobile Workers Alliance, is actually having a protest outside of the Uber founder Garrett Camp's house. But anyways, my question is this. The last time we spoke, we were speaking about Uber and Lyft drivers. And I want to talk to you about that again, but I want to tell you about some developments. So the California governor, Gavin Newsom, signed a new law recently where basically in California, Uber and Lyft drivers and other food delivery people are going to be considered employees now and no longer independent contractors.
Right.
That law is going to kick in January 1. And basically it's going to have more protection for us drivers. And, we're going to, hopefully we'll be, able to collect, wages, overtime wages. Once we start doing that, we'll have more, more benefits, hopefully some paid sick leave with that. But here's the kicker. Uber and Lyft and DoorDash recently announced that they're going to put $90 million towards basically reversing that through one of those, through a California state initiative, like one of those props.
Yes.
And that's set to take, basically they're going to try to put it on the November 2020 ballot. I guess I want to hear what you think about that. I mean, it is direct democracy in a sense that people get to vote on these laws, but, the way we see it is that, and they're calling the Protect California app drivers, something like that. And so basically they're putting in this law and they're trying to say that they're going to provide a lot of benefits for us, such as minimum wage. But when you actually look at the details, some of these things, they don't need to do it through a California state initiative. They could, if they want to pay us more, or if they want to pay us a minimum, they could start doing it tomorrow. Does that make sense? I want to hear.
Absolutely, absolutely. So this is going to be a massive propaganda campaign.
Yeah.
This will be a massive propaganda campaign. They're going to pour money in. They've calculated that getting this reversed is worth more than the 90 million they're going to put in. I don't know if that's the number you're saying. It's the number. I believe you, but it may not be. Let's assume that it is. And you're absolutely right. They're going to package it as if we reverse the decision about the Uber and Lyft drivers having to be classified as employees, we will raise wages and we will do all these different things. And you're completely right. They could have done all of those things all along. And it is direct democracy. Right. But when one side has 90 million, is it really a fair playing field is the question. And this is what always comes up in these cases. So listen, I think it's the right decision for the drivers to be classified as employees. I would not be surprised if there is a very effective campaign mounted to get it overturned. But I do think that it is not clear that they can win that on a ballot initiative. I think that a lot of people everywhere, including in California, understand the importance of why the drivers should be classified as employees. Yeah. So we'll see how it develops.
Right. And then let me just tell you one of the things that they're proposing in this initiative. So supposedly they're going to be paying us minimum wage now, which is all great. And like I said, they can start doing that tomorrow if they really wanted to pay us a minimum wage.
Right.
But the way they want to calculate minimum wage is not, it's as soon as we accept the ride. So a lot of times drivers are sitting in their cars waiting to pick up people, but it's not busy, or the area that they're in is not, no one's requesting any rides. So they're already having loopholes in that. So they're not going to be paying us for waiting.
So in other words, if in a real hour you had 40 minutes during which you were on rides, you really are only owed 2/3 of an hour of minimum wage, even though you were in the car for the full 60 minutes.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So we have hundreds of drivers here in Beverly Hills, and we're going to go to the mansion. He just bought it. He paid $72.5 million for this mansion, one of the biggest purchases here in Beverly Hills in the 90210. But we drivers, we're sick of it, David. And so, if there's any drivers listening, I hope they can get involved with the Mobile Workers Alliance.
Right. Okay, Manuel Antonio, always a pleasure. Great to hear from you.
Muchas gracias, David.
Okay, igualmente. All right, we will talk to you soon. Let's take a quick break. Don't hang up if you were on the phone, because we will go right back to the phones on the other side of this break.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
Let's get back to the phones at 617-830-4750. Where do we want to go today? There are so many people holding who want to talk. Let's try our caller from the 864 area code. Who's calling today from 864?
Hello?
Yeah, that's you.
Hey, I wanted to get your opinion, David, about how do you think that Nancy Pelosi is currently conducting the impeachment inquiry, right? Because I have a couple of criticisms that I'd like to mention. I just want to know what your opinions are, because, recently Nancy Pelosi, she just launched she decided to formally launch a impeachment resolution, right?
Right.
And so my problem with that is that it feels like she's constantly making concessions to the Republicans, because I feel like there was an equally valid reason on both sides of the spectrum, right? Because if she could have just stuck with the idea that there's no need for due process in the impeachment inquiry, right? Because it's not a criminal prosecution,
right?
And if she had just stuck with that, then I feel like she would have looked a lot stronger than now that she's launching the resolution, because I feel like she doesn't gain anything. If she was going to do that, she should have done it from the very beginning.
So here's the thing. I actually, on this, I disagree with you. I think there's lots of fair criticisms of Nancy Pelosi. I think that this is fine. Listen, there was a pre-impeachment inquiry phase during which potential witnesses were being interviewed. Trump was not involved in that. He alleged he wasn't being given due process and that it was unfair. But we are now at this always happens. This happened in the Clinton impeachment inquiry as well. Now they are formalizing the bounds of the inquiry. The president is getting due process. I don't at all think that it weakened Nancy Pelosi's position to do that. And in fact, I think that as Trump continues to say that it's unfair and there's no due process, even though now it's been outlined, I think it actually makes Trump look worse and worse. So I think I'm okay with the way Nancy Pelosi handled that particular thing.
Okay, so let me ask you, why do you think, like, couldn't she have just done that from the very beginning, right? Why do you think, what is the benefit of going back and doing it now as opposed to doing it at the beginning, right? Because now she's giving the right ammunition in order to say that, okay, we were right the entire time. It feels like she's making a concession.
No.
Like
That's where I just disagree with you. I listen. It's normal that there's a pre-formalization phase, and then you formalize it. I don't think she's giving the right anything. And again, I think the right is going to be exposed as completely not credible in their criticisms, because they will continue to say that they're not getting due process and that it's all unfair, even though now it's been formalized. Sure. So I'm not. Here's my concern about. There's two concerns I have about impeachment. Number one, are Democrats actually going to get any of the Trump people to play ball with document subpoenas or with showing up? Because if they don't, then a lot, the public hearings that are supposed to be what convince people that there's been a lot of wrongdoing aren't going to be effective. That's concern number one. And then concern number two, I've seen arguments on both sides, but I'm concerned about how narrow the scope is of the impeachment inquiry. I would like it to be wider, but there's conflicting views about that.
Yes, that was the next thing I was going to mention.
Yeah,
that's the next thing I was going to mention. So I think that we're on the same page, at least in regards to that, narrowing down this impeachment inquiry, right, to just the Ukraine transcript and, the potential quid pro quo between the Trump administration and Ukraine is, do you agree that at least that much is maybe not great political tactics?
Yes. I don't think we needed to include, there's people who are saying, oh, they should have done the Russia collusion. And it's like, no, listen, that's pretty toxic at this point. And I actually think it's the right reason. It's the right decision not to include that. But financial crimes, Yemen, there's much more that could be part of this that's not. And I do think that is a bit concerning. But I've read some pretty good pieces that say it's the right decision to narrow it. We'll see how it plays out, right? In the end, we'll just have to wait and see. Listen, it sounds like you're crinkling paper onto your headset, your handset. So I'm going to let you go, but I really appreciate the call.
Okay. Yeah.
All right. Take care.
Thanks, David. I appreciate it.
Good. Oh, and there he goes. All right. Let's go next to our caller from the 781 area code. Who is calling today from 781?
Hi, David. This is Stephen Elias. Can you hear me?
Yes. We're not on any kind of weird device, speakerphone or Bluetooth, right?
No, not right now. Sorry about that.
Okay, no problem. Go ahead.
So with Thanksgiving coming up, I know a lot of us are going to be sitting down at the table with people that we deeply love, but who may hold beliefs that are kind of dangerous. And I'm not just talking about, I'm on the left. I'm not just talking about people who are on the right. I'm talking about people who are anti-vax, who staunchly don't believe in climate change in any capacity. They don't just sort of have some nuanced view on the scale or something. How do you think we should approach those people if, you do need to try and start making ground on talking to some of them about this stuff and informing them?
Yep.
But if you make them feel cornered and insulted, it's going to do a disservice to the things you believe in, because your beliefs will seem farther out to them than they ever have.
Yep. So here's my idea on this. So here's the framework as I'm understanding it from you. On the one hand, these are people you don't want to ruin a relationship with. You don't want to ruin Thanksgiving. You don't want to be the Grinch that stole Thanksgiving, so to speak. But at the same time, you don't really feel good about just avoiding the dangerous beliefs that some of these people have, whether they are anti-vax or whatever else. So I think here's the happy medium and what I recommend. Apply or employ, maybe better said, a respectful, sort of Socratic method of questioning, not about the facts per se, but about how the people came to believe what they believe. Check out Anthony Magnabosco's YouTube channel where he does street epistemology for some of the technique. and maybe apply a little more, soften it a little more because it might be family or friends or whatever the case may be. And simply, all you're trying to do is step one at Thanksgiving, right? You're not trying to argue all the facts, but you want to get people to at least question how they're coming to their conclusions and start to respectfully inquire about, that's interesting. How long have you had that position? How did you learn about it? Where did you learn about it? Is that a source that you've determined is trustworthy? How do you determine that a source is trustworthy? Most people will very quickly realize that the foundation upon which their beliefs are built is not nearly as strong as they believe. And it's just step one, and then maybe at Hanukkah or Christmas, then you go to step two or whatever the case may be.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thanks for that insight, David.
Yeah, all right, very good. Okay, great to hear from you. Short and sweet, I like it. Let's go next to our caller from the 909 area code. Who is calling today from 909?
Hello, David?
Yes.
Hello? Oh,
hello.
Hi. Okay. I have a question. It's a little bit different from other people, but I would really appreciate this information. My main concern is then that.
Hold on a second. You're breaking up. Did you say your question is or your name is? There was just the phone. It just dropped, and we missed what sounded like a keyword there.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. My name is Ruth. Sheridan.
Love it.
Ruth. And my question concerns voter tampering at the polls, because I feel like the polls are already rigged in Donald Trump's favor. And I feel like he knows this, and that's one of the reasons why he just kind of does whatever he wants to do, because what's the difference? He's going to win anyway. And my question to you is this. Okay, based on that premise, which I believe is a fact, what can we do, the voters, what can I do to put a stop to this or to bring awareness to this? Because what's the point of going down these rabbit holes debating if Donald Trump is going to win anyway, because the polls are already rigged?
So here's my thought on this, and I've been thinking a lot about this for the last 6 months or so, really, really longer. Let's not even get into debating in what way the polls are rigged or if they're rigged. Let's just concede that to some degree there is going to be a combination of voter suppression and messing with, I mean, even concede messing with some voting machines. Let's say there's going to be some of that. There are two things that we can do. Before the election, what we can do is be activists any time that there is an opportunity to push back against a voter suppression technique, to push back against, what's going on in terms of irregularities with voting machines. In some places, the voting machines being used or being challenged. Let's do everything we can in advance. But on election day, our turnout needs to so overwhelm all of the foul play that the foul play won't make a difference. And in the end, if there's less foul play than what we imagine there might be, we just win by more. But the foul play only works to some degree. It works in states where it's close. It works on the margins, and they know that. So they also need to depress the vote. If we really get the vote out, we overwhelm those tactics. That's the reality. So we've all got to go vote.
Oh my gosh, I feel so much better hearing that. Thank you.
Right,
so
but we've got to go vote, because every
right.
time it's the same thing, Ruth, where it's like this time millennials are going to vote and then it doesn't happen, right? So we really need to overwhelm the vote. That's the thing. So the numbers from earlier this week in Mississippi were turnouts up 70%, but Republican turnouts down 6%. That's good. That's what we need in 2020, but it's not a foregone conclusion.
Okay, and you're sure that what they have done with the polling equipment, I hear that, I guess the Republicans are the ones who fund it. You're pretty sure that that's not going to just change your vote automatically to Trump if you vote for his opponent? That's what I'm worried about.
Let's concede that that's going to happen a little bit. They can't give them California with that technique, right? I mean, so this is what I'm saying. That stuff, you can do it at the precinct level in states that are going to be close. So we've got to counter it. Let's assume it's going to happen, and we've got to counter it with overwhelming turnout.
Well, okay, then let's get out the vote.
That's right. Okay, Ruth, a pleasure hearing from you. I appreciate the call. Yes, of course. Thank you so much. Feel free to call in again. Great to hear from Ruth. Ruth bringing some energy. All right, let's check in with our caller from the 574 area code. Who is calling today from 574?
Hi, David. Thanks for taking my call.
Yes.
My name is Andre. I'm a big fan of the channel. So a couple of days ago, you had a caller that called in and talked about the VP pick with Bernie potentially getting nominated, and you guys talked about Tulsi being a pick, and you mentioned that she would be a terrible pick. Can you expand on that and explain why you think that would be the case, and what would be some of your ideal VP picks for Bernie ticket?
Yeah, so listen, we don't need to re-adjudicate Tulsi's entire platform, but although it's very often said Tulsi endorsed Bernie in 2016, so their politics are the same. They're not. They're very different. Their foreign policy views are different. Their positions on healthcare are, as we found out, are very different. So, I want Bernie's VP to be someone not who is going to maybe appeal to a few Republicans in the way that Tulsi does or whatever. I really want someone who's committed to the same progressive platform or very close to it that Bernie Sanders is. Now, as far as who would be a good VP choice for Bernie Sanders, honestly, I'm not thinking about it yet. And I'm not prepared to give any names. I know people have called in and they've floated a few different names. A lot of people call in and say, what about Bernie Warren together? I don't know. I mean, right now, not even a single vote has been cast in the Democratic primary. So I'm not really exploring that yet. I'm looking at other things right now. But I'm confident that Bernie will evaluate a variety of choices. And I believe that he ultimately, I could be wrong, but I believe he's ultimately going to choose someone who's highly aligned with his politics rather than sort of from a different wing of the Democratic Party. But I could be wrong.
Okay, that makes sense. Can I do one more follow-up?
Yes, sure.
Recently in the news, the ruling came down that the Trump tax returns would have to be turned over for the investigators, and there's a high likelihood of it being challenged in the Supreme Court.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think the Supreme Court will take up the decision on that? And if they do side with Trump, what kind of damage do you think that's going to do to the institution of the Supreme Court going forward?
So here's the thing. I assume the Supreme Court, if they take it up, will side with Trump and that the tax returns won't be given to investigators. But here's the thing. We're like 360 days from the election, right? At this point in time, I still believe that the most effective way to get Donald Trump out and the quickest is just to defeat him at the ballot box in November of 2020, because we're under a year away. So Trump, even if the tax returns were turned over to investigators, that doesn't mean that they're going to the House of Representatives. It doesn't mean that they're going public. So I am trying to take a pragmatic approach, which is Donald Trump's Supreme Court, a Supreme Court that is increasingly made up of conservative justices and justices selected by Trump, is unlikely to do what we want them to do when it comes to Trump's taxes. Even if they said they've got to be released to investigators, the investigators don't make them public. They might leak. So I think we don't even worry about it and we just vote the guy out in 360 days.
Yeah, absolutely. I was just asking more from the standpoint of not necessarily getting him out, but setting a precedent
listen, the precedent that the Supreme Court will set when they decide that Donald Trump doesn't have to turn over the tax returns, if that's what they do, will be that checks and balances effectively no longer matter because the president decides who chooses whether the checks and balances still apply. So it'll be extraordinarily damaging. But we can still vote him out in under a year.
Right, and that's why they feel so comfortable just ignoring all the subpoenas that are coming down with the investigation. They just
Absolutely.
Show up.
There's been no evidence so far that
I
they'll be held accountable.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Yep. Hope to hear from you again. That does it for today. Sorry to everybody that I didn't get to. And I do see there are 50 or 55 people. Hopefully next time we will take calls again.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
All right, let's get right into audience questions. The first one, hey David, I am sick and tired of this daylight saving time BS. Is it finally time to get rid of daylight savings time? People often ask this, but really what they mean is, do we want to make daylight savings time permanent? I believe that it would be a good idea to stop changing the clocks. And honestly, I'm actually up for either way, either getting rid of DST or making DST permanent. But my preference would be not to end DST, but to stay on it for the entire year. So remember, we just ended DST. So now that DST is over, we have the sun coming up an hour earlier, and we have the sun setting an hour earlier. I want it darker earlier when I'm trying to sleep. I don't need the sun up. Like, for example, this week in Boston, now the sunrise is officially like 6:20, 6:22, I think it was today, 6:22 in the morning. I'm not up that early, and if I am, I'm okay with it being dark still if I'm up at 6:22 in the morning. I would much rather a 5:30 sunset than a 4:30 sunset. And instead, which is what we have this week in Boston, a 4:30 official sunset, and instead let it be darker earlier when I'm trying to sleep. Now, I know that this doesn't apply to everybody's schedule, but there are way more people who are awake at 5:30 p.m. than there are at 6:15 in the morning, although I know many people get up that early. I understand. I'm not ignoring you. And if you want to make an energy argument by not needing the lights until an hour later, when there are many more people awake that would turn on a light if it's dark at 4:30, you have a huge effective net energy savings. That's number one. There are all sorts of medical claims that are attributed to the switch. The switch itself versus it being light out earlier versus later are sort of two different categories, but there are questions about increased car crashes, workplace accidents, mood, and all sorts of other things. I think that there's probably, you need to look into detail to figure out how many of them are just for the day or two after the switch happens, meaning 2 to 4 days out of the year, and how many are sort of permanent by having the sun set earlier during the winter. You certainly have more people commuting home in the dark when you end DST. My guess is that that also leads to more car accidents. So 36 states have introduced legislation to stop the time change. Some of those say we will stay on standard time all year. Others say we will stay on DST, all year. The main argument that I hear against permanent daylight saving is people who get up earlier are going to get up in the dark, and that's not good. I think that that argument, with peace and love to all of the early risers, I think that that argument is more than outdone by the increased safety of more people getting to commute home in daylight, the increased environmental advantage of not needing to turn on lights until an hour later in the afternoon when many more people are awake. So I am ready to say here today, not end DST, make DST permanent. I want that extra hour in the afternoon all year round. Much of the world, listen, in Argentina in winter, I think in Buenos Aires, sometimes at like 7:30, it's still pretty dark out. It's fine. People get used to it. In northwestern Spain, for other reasons, because of they're on the wrong time zone, but doesn't matter. In northwestern Spain, where my stepmom's from, in Santiago de Compostela, the sun, I think even at 8 p.m. sometimes during summer, 8 a.m. until 8 a.m., it's still pretty dark. But then you get sunlight until like 9:45 in summer, and it's a beautiful thing. Let's get on permanent DST. Tell me if I'm wrong. Please don't cancel me if this goes against your preconceived notion of the issue. I'm just telling you what I think at the time. Okay, next question. David, should Democrats either slow down or speed up the impeachment process? Listen, I think that the timing of impeachment is just fine. And I think that there are bigger issues about the impeachment and whether it's going to be politically effective, which for me is the main consideration. I still am on the side of impeachment is not going to remove Donald Trump. Okay, every time I say it, some people email me, they say, David, you're putting the cart before the horse, or you are conceding a loss already. And it's possible that impeachment could remove Donald Trump. I see it as extraordinarily unlikely. I see the potential benefits. the political ones that will damage Trump in the 2020 reelection campaign that he is very quickly ramping up. So on that basis, we've got a slow build going on right now, even with just, Trump demands due process and tweets like crazy. And then Democrats put out a proposal and approve it to grant him due process by officializing and codifying the inquiry. And Trump goes crazy again for some other reason. Trump is panicking more and more every week on Twitter, which is what you want. You don't want to just drop everything at once. You want to consume Donald Trump from now until November of 2020 with having to, as he sees it, fight the impeachment on Twitter and in the media. All the time he spends doing that is time he has not spent just campaigning on issues, not that he's much of an issue-based guy to begin with. It will be a continued build. He will be tweeting nonsense daily, which he has been. When we get to the public hearings, I would want to get to the public hearings in the next month or so, and then go full speed ahead as the Democratic primaries get going in February and onward in 2020, and just continue putting in people's minds, not only what Donald Trump has done, but continuing to push him to act in wackier and wackier ways. I think that that's all great. I'm fine also with making the timing politically advantageous, because I believe that the benefit to be had from the impeachment inquiry is a political benefit. I don't think it's actually the removal of Trump. I know some people will email me and say, here's how it could lead to Trump's removal. I think it is extremely unlikely. So I'm fine timing it to be damaging politically. But ultimately, what could completely backfire is if Republicans, if Trumpists, if Trump and the people around him are able to just ignore the subpoenas successfully. And already we learned this week, a whole bunch of people who were supposed to show up on Monday simply weren't showing up. If they're able to get away with that, they will successfully weave a counter narrative that actually could backfire on Democrats for 2020. It could make Democrats appear weak. They couldn't even get people to show up, and the entire thing was bogus anyway. So the question for me is not the timing. I think the trajectory is fine. I think for all of her faults, Nancy Pelosi actually has a pretty good sense of what the timing should be to build as the Democratic primary and eventually the general election get going. I think the make or break is going to be, do Democrats just appear to be totally weak, flaccid failures when it comes to actually getting people to provide documents and show up? Because that's what you need. You need the public hearings, you need the documents, and you need the news that will build around that. Already, there are question marks as to whether Democrats are going to be able to successfully do that. Question mark that hopefully will at some point be answered. Let me know what you think about the trajectory of the impeachment inquiry. So far, I think that the timing has been pretty much spot on. Hey, David, is it now time for Bernie or Warren to drop out? Because Joe Biden is still in the lead and we as progressives need to take him out. So listen, I've answered this a couple of times before and it's been a few months, so I'm glad to address it again because we're further into the Democratic primary at this point. What exactly would be the point of Bernie or Warren dropping out? As the question is asked here, the point would be, we don't want Biden to win because he's not a progressive. Bernie and Warren are the two progressives with the best shot. If one drops out, it helps the other, it takes out Biden, and then we laugh all the way to the bank, okay? The problem with this is the math of it, and the math of it, as I reviewed earlier today, still doesn't really favor this strategy. You know, I did a live stream over the weekend on Twitch, and I got a phone call from someone who said, hey, David, you know, I think it was Bernie to win or something like that. I want Bernie to win, but if Bernie doesn't win Iowa, should I maybe look at switching my vote when I vote in New York State? The caller was a New York State voter. And I said, guys, you're getting way ahead of yourselves here. You don't need to do anything like that. Nothing is going to be, there's one way in which those first four primaries, Iowa, New Hampshire, Nevada, and South Carolina, will really sort of, quote, decide the winner, which is if one person sweeps all of them and does it really handily, like with overwhelming numbers, which is not likely to happen at this point, okay? The most likely scenario is that no matter what happens in those first four primaries, it's still going to be a fight into March 3rd. I think March 3rd is Super Tuesday. There's like 14 primaries on March 3rd. Maybe Super Tuesday is actually a different date. But there's a huge chunk of votes that are going to be coming after those 4 primaries, okay? Anyone will almost likely be able to win after those first 4. Support who you like. If it's Bernie or Warren, that's totally fine. Because here's the math about Bernie and Warren, okay? Warren supporters have Bernie as their second choice, but only by 3 points over Biden, okay? Meaning that for every 100, I believe I'm going by the numbers I recall, for every 100 Warren supporters that change their minds, or if Warren bails, go to their second choice candidate, for every 100, I think 28 go to Bernie and 25 go to Biden, okay? That's not enough for Bernie to close the gap if Warren quits, all right? Now let's look at the other option. Bernie quits. Bernie supporters now, according to the latest Morning Consult poll, Bernie supporters have Biden as their top choice by 2 points over Warren. I think it's like 28 to 26. So if Bernie quits, for every 100 of his supporters that go to their second choice, Biden builds a lead over Elizabeth Warren, okay? If either drops out, they help each other and Biden roughly equally. So the math doesn't support the strategy of Bernie quitting to help Warren or Warren quitting to help Bernie. Now, you could say, well, those might be the second choices as of now, but if one quits and endorses the other, then it'll shift those numbers. It may shift the numbers to some degree, but we're just talking about the primaries here. And my prediction is it would not shift it as much as you imagine. So let's just all go out. If you're an Iowa voter, you're going to get the first crack at it. Go out and vote whoever you actually support. If you're a New Hampshire voter and Iowa doesn't go the way you want, go out and vote for whoever you actually support in New Hampshire. If one person wins Iowa and another wins New Hampshire, and then it's time for Nevada, I believe is the third primary, go out and vote for whoever you like in Nevada. This is going to sort itself out. There is so much time for consolidation in the Bernie Warren supporter groups that these are not the things we should be doing. The candidates who are in the top 3 should not drop out. There's a whole bunch of people at the bottom that need to go because they've got no shot and are just a distraction on the stage. But it is not time for Bernie to drop out. It is not time for Warren to drop out. Why would someone in the top 3, who is right in there within a few points of being in the lead of this thing, drop out at this point in time? My suggestion is that we stop talking about that and focus on the important things like substantive debates, figuring out exactly how each person will pay for their healthcare plan, and clearing the stage of some of the hangers-on that have no chance whatsoever of winning and are contributing nothing other than giving the people who have a shot time to sip water as they wait for the next question to come to them. If you disagree with me, let me know. We've got a great bonus show for you today. 2 ways to get the bonus show: become a member at joinpacman.com or become a patron at patreon.com/David Pakman Show.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.